should put something in Discord too.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask. Is it the same link from yesterday?
That's a good question. Let's take a look.
The
Hello, everyone. Sorry for that delay. We are live, just waiting for some links to go up in Discord so that we can make sure everyone gets in. So we're just kind of hanging on till then, but welcome.
All right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to, it's day 2 of the hackathon. I hope everything's going well for everyone. Get chat up here. There it is. So, what we have planned for you for today is we're going to go through kind of just a little like workshop demo of GroKit Core, kind of from concept to execution, if you will. So yesterday we did a lot of introduction to the systems. It was a little bit more tutorial-ish. So today we're just going to kind of go through and work kind of like how we work. I'll be a little bit slower. And that's not because we don't think anyone can handle it. It's literally just because of the frame rate of the stream. So we're going slow, but it's just so that everyone can follow along with that. So with me today is Cordelia. Hello.
Hello.
Cordelia's going to be driving because she's way better at that stuff than I am. And I will be narrating and talking along and answering questions in chat that anyone might have accumulated over the last day. So, just wanted to start off kind of going through what we're going to be touching on a little bit in the next hour or so. We're going to just put together a little bit of an interactable, playable kind of puzzle using just GroKit Core components. So some of the components that we're going to cover, it's most of them, I guess. Well, most of the core components, as listed here in our docs. So we're going to be talking about activators, triggers, trigger reactions, spawners, toggles, timers, do movements, do rotations, count puzzles, score systems, do parent things like Chris talked about yesterday. That was one of them. Just kind of the main gamut of components that we usually use in typical gameplay or application development. We're also going to be using the XR movement system with the XR strafing system that we have, so that we can just move like a typical character in a game, strafing left and right based on which direction you're looking, and forward and backward. So we'll show a little bit of that too. But as I said, as we go through this and as we're chatting, as we're developing all this stuff, please feel free. Anyone has any questions or anything like that, we're kind of working asynchronously, so Cordelia will be able to keep chugging along as I'm answering questions, and then we'll get back to the demo. So a little more free form today. So please, if anyone has any questions, just let me know in the chat. But otherwise, I can flip over here to Cordelia. There we go. We're looking at Cordelia's Unity now. There it is.
All right. And it may look a little different from yesterday because I have a kind of different preferred layout. It's one of those things that's lovely about Unity, that you can kind of put windows where you want them. I tend to have a more kind of art and implementation focused layout. So I like seeing my project view. I've got the game view down here, console, easy to access, of course. And then hierarchy inspector and a couple things up here, including the GroKit helper window, always useful.
Mm-hmm.
So we will get going, and I like having a little bit of a background when I build stuff. So we're gonna make a little like kind of room by room dungeon with some different puzzles in each room of how to get through the rooms. And then we've got our camera rig controller. You can find this in the meta integrations prefabs folder. It's just a drop in, and it has the XR movement on it. I think you have to enable it when you first put it in. I have a couple of settings I changed on here to get it over to specifically being the strafe movement. I think it defaults as rubber band flying, which is a very fun movement system. But the strafe version is more of a grounded kind of walking movement. All right,
and it started a little slow. That we noticed when we first hit play. It was like,
Yeah.
ooh, we gotta crank the speed up a little bit, but be careful. If you put the speed too high, then it might be a little bit disorienting. Um, but yeah, the default move speed is the easiest way to adjust that. And can you expand the movement again? The
Yeah.
like hierarchy. So yeah, for these, whether it's rubber band, drag, or strafe, whichever one you want, it's literally just enabling or disabling the component. You don't have to worry about like wiring a new reference in anywhere else or anything. So if you wanted to even just experiment with these, just dragging that prefab out, the GroKit Meta camera rig controller, just dragging that out, toggle these on and off, play around with them, figure out which movement you like the best. It's just as easy as that. And there's a
Mhm.
corresponding hand tracking rig as well. We just picked the controller one so that we could have analog movement, which is a little more consistent for demo purposes. But there is a hand track version as well. So um, you just have to drag those into your scene. You're good. I mean, it was just as simple as that. We dragged it in, hit play, and we're like, oh, it works. It's great when that happens.
Yeah. So yeah, I got that done. And then let's get a little bit of environment in here. We have a little bit of kind of very basic primitives built environments just for fun of being able to get something in and get building quickly. So let's do, what was it, the multi-purpose, or as we used to call it in my school when I was younger, multi-purpose. You put dolphins everywhere.
Yep.
So this one, I'm going to take the ceiling off just so we can see. This is built of a bunch of different components, so it's very, very customizable just for getting a room in and having a way to have a space to build in.
Shout out to
Each of these
Alyssa.
walls. Sorry, what?
Shout out to Alyssa for putting these
Yes,
prefabs together.
the wonderful Alyssa built this. And then we've got the sub components. You can decide if you want a wall with a door in it, and it's got one of the pre-built doors, and it's even the doors are customizable. You can like Bryce and Chris had gone over yesterday.
Mhm.
It's the with the door trigger, with the double, you can switch it to a hatch or a slide or a rotate, whatever you want to do there. And you'll just want to pick what each wall is and turn off. So let's see if this is forward. Let's keep that one a door. And then we'll turn off the solid wall, and then the other ones we'll keep as solid walls. So turn off the doors there. So that's just the selecting those and setting those off. And then we've got a room to go with. And we've got our camera in the room. So now we are looking at how to get kind of an escape room sort of thing, I guess you could say, or dungeon room. So let's go back, grow blocks, and then how do we want to do this? Block dropping a trigger.
Yeah, so we're thinking standard. I mean, well, yeah. When we were concepting this, we were like, it'd be really cool to have just like a 2D Zelda dungeon esque simple room, but in VR. So yeah, so one of the first, so if we work backwards from what we were doing, there's a locked door, right, and you need to get the key for the locked door. Classic Zelda. So we were thinking it would be good to have a switch with some kind of block that you put on the switch to press the switch. Again, classic Zelda. And then when that switch is pressed, it spawns a key. So yeah, so the components that we usually use for stuff like this are the item ID triggers, and I like to use the debug grab object because we could set up like a grabbable object and all that stuff, but the debug grab object comes with an item ID component already on it. That's really the only major difference. And then yeah, then it's just a matter of hooking up some spawners.
All right, so the debug one, is that a different one?
Yeah, so yeah, the grab object base works as a grab object. We would just add an item ID to it. But the debug grab with item ID already has it, so I usually use that one. But it's essentially the same amount of steps. So like if you have the grab object base, you have to add an item ID. If you use the debug one, you don't have to add the item ID, but you'll have to remove the visuals or at least toggle them off. So it ends up being like a similar amount of clicks. But
Yeah.
six of one, as they say.
So yeah, so these are the two grab objects. Basic one, where like you said, you could just add to it, or this one where it's already set up and has the reaction and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as they went over yesterday, we've got a sub-object for visuals that can do some stuff, and then you can replace the objects beneath them however you like to. So yeah, we'll go with the debug one for this. And then
The
let's
debug
see,
one is nice too because it already has it's already wired up with the trigger reactor um, to let you know if you have it changes color to let you know the trigger has occurred, and then depending on the color it changes to, it lets you know if you are actually causing that item ID trigger to fire its outward activator or not. So sometimes it's nicer to start with that so that you at least know that your trigger is working. Because I have been in the situation before where I've started with a grab object base uh, and add the item ID to it, and then it it looks like it's not triggering, but it actually is. I just didn't wire up like my inward activator or something. So I was like, oh, the collision doesn't work, and I tried adding the rigid bodies and this and that, and it was just because I didn't wire the inward activator. But if I had used the debug one, I would have known, well, the trigger is at least working because it's changing color. Um, so that's kind of like a self-defense mechanism, if you will, from my end. So that's why I habitually use the debug version instead. And that's kind of, I think it's a good workflow to get started with when it's your first few sessions in a GroKit Core project. Is if there's a debug for it, it's nice to use. So like we have the debug color changer as well. When I was first doing some tutorials for people or onboarding them, I would use the debug color changer, and you can actually see it in all of the tutorials in our documentation. Where I would use the debug color changer just to show that the trigger was doing the correct thing. So if I wired the trigger up correctly and the debug color changer was changing the color of something, I know that the connection is correct. Then I can swap out the debug color changer with whatever functionality I actually wanted to happen, like a door opening or a machine starting or a spawner, beginning its loop. It can literally be anything because you just swap the activators that it's talking to.
make the little key pedestal, the
Yeah.
color change. Since we're talking about that. And then I'm going to put the little key. So, and then we have some little fun just starter items like the keys.
Mm-hmm.
Little key in here.
There it is.
This is going to start off.
I love that little key. That key's nice, especially the key with the little smoke poof particle effect.
Oh yeah, that's a
Just
good. Yeah, we'll
a
do.
blast.
Yeah, we'll definitely we'll start with the very basic setup, and then we'll add a little bit of.
Yeah. Little flare.
Yeah. All right. And
So
then,
yeah, that's kind of like the next like next step above basic workflow. So if basic workflow is just get it in and working and get, debugs in place and who cares about visuals and stuff, now we're kind of expanding into like the next step, which is have some visuals so that you have some context of what's going on once you have your functionality worked out. Then the next step after that, once it all works and it's all kind of routed together and looking good, then you can start to add polish. So a lot of the tutorials and a lot of the stuff that we've been working through together with y'all has been like basic stuff. So we want to make sure that we get to some of the polished stuff that we can do as well with this so that y'all can see how that kind of works.
Yeah, I want to show real quick a little bit of in the GroKit helper, GroKit helper, which is our window that's just got a little bit of shortcuts and helpful functionality and things. One of the things we use in a lot of our development is something we call off on start, which is the _OOS after objects, because a lot of times it's helpful to have scene objects be off at the beginning, but then when you're messing with stuff, you sometimes turn them on and then you forget, oh, is that supposed to be off or not? Pretty simple, but it's a helpful kind of code to always know this is supposed to be off. So now we built that into our system a little bit that you can do this. It'll just add it to your text, and then this will actually find anything in the scene that has that and set it off for you.
Super handy.
Now, yeah, so the key now is just turned off because that's how I want it to start. So now we've got our debug grab object with an item ID. What is the item ID, in fact? Oh, our item ID is set to any. Let's make this correct. And then we've got our item ID trigger. This has got the outward activator on it, and then underneath is the trigger itself. We want to set that as well to correct. And then, so that will now trigger this. And then if you see something that has debug like this beforehand, it means it usually has the debug disabled. This is, like Bryce was saying, it'll have debug visuals on it, but that the disable and build means that when you actually build it out, it won't show up, which is nice for an editor. You know exactly where the stuff is without having to click in a lot or have all the gizmos on, but you never have to worry about it being in the build. So this will then go back up to the activator. It's plugged in here, and then it has its own. If you want stuff, when you want stuff to have its own kind of internal reactions, you put that directly in the trigger, but then anything that will go outside the prefab, that's when you route it through the outward activator. So now for this, we add in, and actually we can do, if we had a whole system or another set of prefabs that were meant to do a thing, we could just plug it in with the inward activator here. In this case, I'm just turning on the key, so I'll just run it here, and maybe the key turns off if you take the item back out. So then we'll just plug these, and we'll also plug, and actually the color changer is an inward, isn't it? It is. So we'll plug that. We'll plug the color changer into the inward activator and then do the key manually here. So now we've got the key will turn on and the pedestal will change color. We can give that a quick test run.
Nice.
Make sure I hope my controllers are charged.
I forget, like, for me, I always forget that the controllers will run out of battery one day. So props to them for making them last so long that I forget. But yeah, that is the problem. Then it's like, oh right, your controller's dead. I forgot they were mortal.
Well, and also working on GroKit all day, everything
True.
I'm doing is hand tracking. I don't even remember the
Yeah, what's a controller again? What is this, 2023 with the controllers?
And one of those notes that I'm sure everybody knows by now, but always save before you do your tests.
Yeah.
There is always a chance for the editor to crash during a test. So
the amount of times I have
save often.
Yeah, the amount of times I have hit play and it's like hangs for just a second too long, and then I see the little asterisk next to my scene name is just the worst feeling ever. Because like, oh no, please Unity, please, you can do it.
And I also make my editor turn purple when it's in play mode, because remembering things don't save while you're editing in play.
Yeah.
If you're doing testing. So I've got little controllers, and this is part of our default setup. You can do this, the left side, you can do strafing, forward and back. It's a nice little, just quick movement setup. And then I can put my hand in, grab the cube, woo. And then we go, I think that's just my system being a little slow. And we've got a key.
Hey.
Key does not do anything yet, but we've got a key. That is successful test.
Sometimes just the act of grabbing a key is satisfying enough.
Right. That's your reward. That's everything.
Yeah. Yeah, you got a key. What do you want to do something with it?
You're asking too much. Now, okay, so what do you think? Particles first or door setup first?
We could do the door. The door setup is nice because then well, actually, it's already set up. Yeah, we should do door because it's already got the do movement and stuff.
We gotta lock the door.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the quick way to lock the door is just to take probably the collider on its trigger, set that in active. We could even, if we want to be fancy about it, stick it here for an inward on this.
So this will be a setup for if you're using the door prefab already. So we've
Mhm.
already kind of shown, like, setting up just how to do an inward activator, like set active, turn on and off. So if you wanted to, you could have a completely separate object. Like if you don't have a door, if this is for something else, you could just have an object that is your lock, that you can just tell to be locked or unlocked, and then its activator will take care of what that means. In this case, because we're using door prefabs we already have, there's already trigger set up, there's already movement, there's already activator set up. So yeah, so what Cordelia's doing here is just adding an inward activator to the doors that can tell them to basically become active. So if it's locked, then you can't just walk into it and have the door open, which is what the prefab functionality is. So in this case, if we literally turn off the trigger, then it won't open until we turn the trigger back on. So unlocking the door is actually turning on the collider for the door to open because we're using the prefab.
Yeah, and then yeah, and typically, like if you're building, you probably don't have your whole room set up as a prefab. This would be a thing that you'd want to make as a separated prefab and stuff. But for this, for one-off stuff, we will put it in this way.
And I actually, in my project stuff, I have a lock, like prefab, that simply just tell this to tell another activator to do things, when triggered with a good is what I usually use as the item ID.
Yeah. So actually, and I will do that actually as a separate lock object. I'll do another item ID trigger over here.
Yeah.
Let's see, and this will be. I like to do an underscore or a dash after and kind of like identify which one goes to what.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I think we have a gold material, a gold debug material.
yeah, that's a good. We could, yeah, you can set that for further. Well, and I think, well, here it's, yeah, I have to set it there, but it likes to hide it. Sometimes it tucks it away. And it's like, I don't know why. That's usually what I'm looking for, and you tuck it away. So anything, yeah. So we have a bunch of default materials that are just kind of little helpful for debugging sort of things that are different trigger materials. I can help you identify which one's which. All right, so we've got our key one. So now we got to make sure to go into the item one. I'm going to set this one. Let's call this yellow, and we'll make sure, because I believe, if I recall, that the key itself is already set to yellow, but we will definitely double check that because that's good to know. No, okay, so we will set, oh, nope, not bad.
Bad
Yeah.
key.
Okay, so our key is set to yellow, and that will go to that. And then, so for this, we've got the outward activator here. I want to clear, because I just duplicated this. Let's just do some reverts, get that back to standard. And then with the door one, we're assuming, typically this would have been a door, like Bryce said, that was already prefabbed as a lockable door with a different setup, but we'll just plug that right in there. And now that will run that, and we will be good to go.
So one nice thing about duplicating this stuff is if we already have an item ID trigger out, in this case the cyan sphere, and we already have an item ID object, in this case the cube, we know that those work because we just tested it. We put the cube in the sphere, the key appeared. So by duplicating, like Cordelia did, the item ID trigger, we know that the collision already works, the triggers already work, everything's already good. So the key being grabbable with an item ID, we just need to set the item ID to something else so that it corresponds with the correct spot. So essentially what we did is the cube has an item ID of correct. The cyan sphere is an item ID trigger looking for anything tagged as correct. And then when we duplicated that, we set the key to have an item ID of yellow, and then the key item ID trigger to listen for anything that has the tag yellow. So again, just making sure that these two, the trigger and the receiver, I guess you could say, just match tags. That's all you have to do. Once you have one in the scene, like one set, It's really easy to just duplicate, switch the tag, and you're good to go.
And another just note about this, we have some just item ID enums set up because it's convenient to just know that they're going to match. They're always spelled right and everything. We do have an option though to just use your own strings and make whatever you want it to be. So you're not stuck to using. You just have to make sure then that they match, the strings match exactly in both ones. If you use that, and they have to be on the same setting.
Yeah, so there's technically an infinite amount of tags you could have if you wanted to. It's just a matter of making sure that you're spelling them correctly. So we have the existing list of stuff, just so that it's nice and easy drop down. But yeah.
Is there a? Oh, I see. I can play it maximize. So when I go in, I'm sure that was kind of tiny last time. Actually, I realize now.
Oh yeah.
So I'll switch that to maximized. There we go. Oh, yeah, my right controller's a little low. Oopsies. That's okay.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
I'm trying to be quick turn and I'm not quick turn. All right, so we've got our block. Our block will not work here. Gets angry and red. But
Wrong.
it will work. Sorry, my steering is not good. I might need to slow it down just a touch. And then we've got our key. Woo-hoo.
There it is.
Works in the door. And then our door opens. Yay! I'm free.
Yay, we did it.
And then I can come back in. Great. So we've got our first room puzzle. So now let's add some fancy things to it, maybe.
Oh, and Chris wanted to remind me, because yeah, we just added this in the GroKit helper. There is just a make trigger button. So it's
Oh, I might need to update that.
Oh, okay. Well, there will be a make trigger button in the GroKit helper where you can literally select any object and just click make trigger. Sorry, it's so new it's not in yet, so don't worry about it. Future functionality. Sorry, I'm used to seeing a different version. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yes, so we had talked about that, Chris. My bad. So yeah, there will be a make trigger button where you can just select an object, click make trigger, and not only it'll add the collisions, it'll add the item ID stuff, and it'll also give it like the debug material as well, so that you know it's a trigger. Super handy. So there will be a ton of different ways that we can get the trigger functionality, because obviously collision is a big part of any kind of interactive experience. So that's why you can have there's the grow blocks you can do. There will be the prefabs you can use. You can just make the components. You can just add the components to an object yourself, or you can use the GroKit helper to make a trigger. So there's going to be at least 4 different ways that you'll be able to make a trigger very, very easily. So
I realized I did not use some of the fun ones because we got options for lots of different stuff in here. I'm going to do a little weight pad that you actually set the item onto here. So just kind of.
Could we make the whole pillar like descend?
Oh yeah. So one thing we'll need to do for that is this will then need to be a gravity-based object, which
so that it doesn't come out of the trigger. Just because I think with the stream, I think it'll be easier to see.
Yeah, that's true, than the little one. So we have a couple options. We have to make this gravity-based, which is definitely doable with it. We set this. I like to keep it kinematic when you're beginning, because that means it's not running any of the physics stuff, like trying to settle itself, or potentially if it's stuck inside something, flinging off into space.
And you'll never see it again.
At the beginning, but we have an option in the XR grab object that it stays kinematic on drop, and this will, even if it doesn't start kinematic, it'll switch it to that when you drop it. Or if you turn this off, even if it starts kinematic, it'll switch it unkinematic when you drop it, which is really kind of lovely. So you have a kinematic, it's just a stationary object, and then you pick it up, and now it's more interactive physics object, which is nice.
Yeah, it's nice that we specify on drop. So the first drop will then enact whatever this checkbox is, but before that it'll be whatever you started it.
Yep. And I'm gonna make it a little bigger so it's a little.
I think that's more performant too. Like if you had like a shelf of stuff that was not trying to do physics calculations until you grab each of them, then
Yes,
I think it's
absolutely.
more performant.
Yeah, it can definitely be problematic to have a bunch of non-kinematic objects just kind of hanging out in the scene because they'll start jangling around.
Oh yeah,
Pretty weird interactions that happen for sure. All right, so we've got our trigger here, and we actually want this trigger. I think it's a good idea for the trigger to stay with the cube while it descends. And so I could just parent this directly to this. I think I tend to prefer making a new parent object because you don't necessarily want to put stuff, your top objects, you really want to kind of keep them at a uniform scale for as long as possible before having stuff start to be different scales. So I highly recommend to kind of create an empty parent. Actually, that one does the 0 out. Does this one do it where it is? Okay, so create an empty under it.
Yeah, you still have to do the switch around.
Let's call this trigger holder. Well, you moved it. I'll put this above. I'm going to now standardize this, put the cube under it. Now I'll also put our item ID cube here. And this is not just going to be a holder, it's actually going to be a mover. And we will do move. And here is our do movement script. Lots of fun things this can do. Let's see. So world is good for this because it's a top object.
Nice global Y.
Stick that here. I think this defaults to itself if you don't set it, I believe, right?
Yes. Sometimes I like to set it just so that I know I have engaged with this mechanic. And then and this is something it took me a second to get used to, but just like everyone knows in chat and all that, the movers, like the actual component is kind of setting up how it moves, or how it completes the movement, with the curve and the speed. What the actual movement that it's doing is set by whatever's telling it to move. Because when we first started using these, I was looking, I'm like, where's the move by X? But that is what you are telling it to do through your activators. So how you want it to move is on the component, but how much it's moving by or where it's moving to is all done through the functions.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a move to because just to keep it. Sometimes move by, if you've got repeatable actions, move by kind of can make it keep moving, which is sometimes what you want, but move to will make it always go to the spot.
Imagine a scenario. Let's all imagine a scenario. And it's definitely not a scenario that I was in and was confused by, where we have almost this exact same situation where you put an object onto a trigger and then that trigger moves in some fashion. Well, I didn't set any kind of kinematic or anything, so what was happening is I was doing a move by like 5 units, and I would put the object on the trigger and it would start to move down, and because it was moving quickly enough, my cube was coming out of my trigger and then falling into my trigger over and over and over again. So what was happening is it looked like it was moving infinitely, and I was like, okay, maybe the script is broken, maybe it's looping. Apologies, it wasn't. Chris only makes good scripts. It wasn't his fault. It was triggering over and over again, and because every time it triggered, it was told to move by 5 units, that kept compounding, so it just never stopped. So as soon as I switched it to move to, no matter how many times you trigger it, it's just going to move to its destination, and it will stay there until you tell it to move to something else. Same thing with rotation. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, is if you rotate by, that's okay as long as you make sure that you don't trigger it multiple times if that's not your intent. Otherwise, rotate to or move to is just a better way to go.
So as we're doing some polish, I'm also going to add some fun little effects with So I'm going to put this under here just to be able to position it to where I want it. And then I want to bring it back out. What is this? Plain awake. So this is just a little primitives-based poof for that to appear. And we could just put this under the key because it is a play on awake.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so there's a ton of ways we can do the particle here. We can set it here. We can set it as its own off on start object. And then we can have it get run from here as well. We can also add an effects spawner to the other cube. Let's see, let's make another. Well, let's call this key holder, key pedestal holder, something.
Mm-hmm.
You can always rename things.
Oh, yeah.
And then make sure that this is again set to even. And then I believe that's under, we have this as a grow block, so let's try. Nope. Looping effects, passive field effects. I don't think that's what I was looking for. Or I guess it's a very simple setup, so I think it may not be a grow block because it's.
Yeah, that might just be just a component thing.
Yeah. So this one, yeah, the FX spawner. And I can tell that to spawn this and just drag it in there. This will also tell it when to destroy the object if you want it to. I'll give that a couple seconds to play out.
And what's nice too is like if we wanted to do like if we had like if the particle effect was looping, we could have something loop. Like we could put this effect around the pedestal as it's lowering, and just set the death time to the amount of time it will take it to lower, and then it'll loop until it's done moving, and then it'll kind of finish, which is also a nice little kind of effect.
And I put it under the wrong one, so I'm fixing that real quick. That's why, yeah, naming is good. I didn't name my cubes, and that was a problem.
Yeah, naming, yeah. I always forget until I'm like, wait, I have so many cubes now.
Okay, now my key is off in space, so I'll just bring that back. And my FX spawner, I want that to be up where the key is. Or use 6.5. I like clean numbers. You know?
Yeah.
All right, so now we've got all of this, and this is actually kind of prime territory for possibly making a prefab out of.
Mm-hmm. Especially, I mean, keys as a mechanic, if you're building like a dungeon crawler kind of thing like this, and you have a method that is a really nice polished, this spawns a key, then yeah, prefabbing for sure. Because then all you need is the lock with a slot to tell some other activator to do its thing, and the key prefab, which you can, again, like we talked about yesterday, you could just drag and drop this in, like if you just want a key sitting on the ground, or you could have it spawn after a certain amount of enemies are defeated using a count puzzle. Oh. Every time an enemy is defeated, you add to the count puzzle, and once the count puzzle reaches the total, it spawns the key. Or you could have like a secret button, just somewhere in the room that you push, and then a key drops from the ceiling. A whole bunch of different stuff you could
do. And so with the spawner, the FX spawner, and we've got a couple options. You can, if you don't want it to just spawn wherever you place this, you can use the spawn here and then just set whatever that location is. It does require a like game object transform plugin, but you can put that however you want then. Or you do it that it just spawns on itself, which is specifically wherever that is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm doing here.
And I have put in a request. I'm sure it's already in, or in like the next push, to match, to have a checkbox to match the scale, in case you need to scale like the particle system up instead of like creating another prefab with it bigger. I know you're technically, I think, not supposed to scale particle systems, but sometimes it's just easier. So there will be like a match scale to the object as well. So if it's a little too small, you can just scale the FX spawner object or the transform up, and then the spawn particle system will match that.
Yeah, the only caveat to that, particles scale okay as long as it's uniform, but you really
Yes.
want to avoid non-uniform particle scaling because they do funny things.
Yep.
But generally, yeah, again, you want to keep scaling uniform as far down your hierarchy as possible because it
Yes.
can cause
Yeah.
cranky.
There have been a couple situations that I've been in where I start with like a trigger or a key or something, and the mesh is on the parent object. So when I adjust it to like look visually how I want it, and I get everything set up and routed, and then I drag and drop something onto it or create a new object under it, and it like shears in half because it's the parent object is scaled weird, and then I'm always reminded like, oh right, the the hierarchy. Definitely the parent should always be uniform 111.
Yeah.
Just the individual elements underneath should be the things that are that do that.
Yeah, like as far to the visual side. So that we've got here, so because this now contains all of this, I went back to the trigger, moved it to this one for the inward activator, and we no longer need now the grab objects that's included. So we've got still the mover on itself, and then it will run the key holder. So now we will get poof and all sorts of things. And let's see, do we want a fun thing on the wall as well? We do lights like you did on the other one.
Oh yeah.
Or confetti. I like the confetti.
Confetti's nice. Confetti and a spotlight, maybe like a nice spotlight highlighting like, hey, here's where you're going.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, because then maybe the key's not right next to the door and it's that obvious. Maybe the key's somewhere else, and then you've got to figure out that it goes to the door, so then you spotlight it. So let's do that. Just place my key trigger. There it is. Okay. Actually, we'll do that here, and then we can give all that the holders. Just call this the lock. Actually, we'll do door effects because this is already pretty well contained. But since the door, usually we could also put this in the door. The door is part of another prefab system though, so I'm going to just do its effects as a thing here.
Yeah, and then we could combine, like you could put the door effects on the door and then drag that and make that like a variant, so that it still has the door, but now this is like the door with effects. There's a bunch of different ways you can kind of start to make this your own within what we have without being destructive towards like the root stuff, because you wouldn't want to. I would recommend not necessarily committing certain prefabs overwriting, because they're when you update the GroKit package, it might cause some issues. But
yeah, and something like this, often it's good to have this as a prefab to pull in, but then you might break if you don't want it to necessarily change later or something like that, you might just unpack this to have access to the individual parts, and then this is still the door prefab, which is nice. And so now if I'm doing a door effects kind of lock thing here, I might actually move. Wait, that's going to be a bit miswired then. Let's see, we'll get there.
But there's a lot of different hierarchy and routing options and things like that for sure.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna, so we got a spotlight and we can set this off. Yep. I think that was maybe and then where did I stick the poof? That is here. So this, I mean, the Control Shift V is a lovely shortcut that will put something in the same position under the new object as it was in the previous one. Nice. You select what you want the parent object to be and Control Shift paste it. Control Shift V paste, and it'll pop it right under in the same position.
Yep. Control Shift F will put the object wherever your camera currently is, and that's another handy one I use a lot.
Nice.
Mostly for other cameras.
1 of 10,000. Woo.
Yep.
All right, so this we can do an inward because let's say we might be using this again.
Always be routing.
Let's go with light enabled. Or no, we turned the whole thing off, so we'll do game object. But you can also light enabled instead of complete off on start. That's up to how your preference of setup. And then if we want this also to be removable, like let's say you remove the key, we can copy paste it and then just flip, obviously this part. Oops, I have that backwards. This one. There we go. Flip it so the light turns off.
An instance of turning the light component off instead of the whole object is kind of like a pre-warm thing. I remember a while ago we did like an alert mode, similar to what we have in Space Dragon, where there were like spotlights that were rotating, and so if we turn the whole component off, they wouldn't be rotating. So when we turn them on, the light would be in the same position as when they turned off, which isn't really realistic. So we just turned the light component off so that the object could keep rotating, so that when we turned it on, it was like mid-rotation, so it didn't like have to start up. So it's kind of like pre-warming it. So just wanted to mention that. That's like an instance of when you would do both, or use one instead of the other, I should say.
Okay, so now I want to go back to my lock. I should actually call this lock because I keep saying key and thinking it's the other thing. So now here's a nice place for using extra activators. I've got the door itself. Now I can throw the door effects in. All right, and because I didn't do it last time, let's do a save. We'll do a quick test, make sure everything's in the right places, and I'm saving again because I'm kind of like that. Save early, save often.
Always, yes.
It's like I never quite believe it that when it's saved.
Yeah. It isn't saved until you've hit Control S like 6 times.
Kind of like Control C, 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 C.
Yep. Yep.
Yes, I know my batteries. Does it show that to you guys? Probably not.
I don't think so.
Just gonna tell you about my battery. Okay, I've got my block and block to the trigger. Trigger drops. Woo! Oh, I was because of the angle. So that's something to consider. Obviously, especially with VR, is player view control. So it might be something to arrange this kind of in front of this, or to the side, or to a place where they're more likely to be looking in the direction of the key. So maybe actually I'll shift this to this side, since when you come from here, you're typically going to come straight across to here and see it from this angle. So it's kind of like the being aware of player view. You can't control it completely, but you can kind of like influence it and help them to be in the right place for what you want them to look at, without
like a director.
Yeah. So then here we will stick the key in this time, and then the light's kind of faint, but it's on.
It's there.
I don't see it there. I might make it a little more. I'll make this. Oh, if I put the ceiling.
I was gonna say if we put the roof back, it should work, or we should be able to see it anyway. It did work though.
Yeah. So now I can escape the room. Yay! So yeah, that's some examples of just some basic setup on those.
Yeah.
So now let's make another room. I'm going to duplicate this one, and now since all of these are kind of, oops, that is not, where is that supposed to go? Since we've kind of got, oh yeah, and I have a little ground, just safety collider under there. Since these are all now part of kind of the same system, let's group them together. Oops, wrong button. So that's Control Shift G. You can also do, I think there's another create empty parent would also do that, I believe. So let's say call this room 1.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I've ever tried creating an empty parent with multiple objects selected. That's cool.
It's a good quit. Let's find out. It works.
Hey, that's
So that
awesome.
must be the same. Yeah, same.
That's
as,
actually way more. Maybe that's the actual intent because I've always used it like you used it before. Create empty parent, meaning please zero this child object to the parent, or please leave the child object where it is and put the parent in the same spot, but it never does. But maybe it's because it's
Mhm.
supposed to be a group method, not a pivot parent method.
Yeah, yeah, it looks like it,
Interesting.
and yeah, so it's the same functionality as the
Yeah,
Control Shift D. It's good to know.
for
All right,
sure.
so room number 2. So we'll scoot this over, and we have lovely little hallways that match up. If you holding Control, if you don't know, that will help you snap it along. I actually have mine set to be a little bit of a more incremental snap. I have it 0.25 snap. I think it defaults to 1.
You can
Um,
also, if you have them all selected again, you can also hold V, and you could vertex snap like that one connecting hallway.
oh yeah.
So if you hold V, it'll highlight like the nearest vert, and then you can drag it and it'll snap to the next nearest vert. And if you have multiple objects selected, it'll move all of them. In other
Very cool.
engines, and I won't say who, and there's a lot of times where you're trying to move multiple objects, and when you do something like that, they will all move independent of each other, and they'll all snap into one spot, which doesn't make any sense. So the fact that that even works, major props to Unity.
Nice. So yeah, we want to switch out our wall here so we can actually get into the room, but we don't actually want the door, but we want the door frame. So we can kind of get rid of the trigger here because that's already being handled on the other side. I don't necessarily want the doors, but I want the frame pieces. So you can just kind of dig in and
And
modular whatever you want it to do.
if you did want the doors, you could leave them and just not disable the trigger, and then it would be like a like a Metroid kind of deal where it's like
Yeah.
you go in one end and then the other one automatically opens for you, like as you move through it. But
Yeah, that's
sometimes I like having the doors open because then it feels like you kind of get a preview of what you're seeing as you're walking through like the threshold. It's a little bit more, yeah, it's more cinematic if you can see it
yeah.
without the doors on the other side in the way.
And now I'm caught because that does sound nice. The first one is very, very good for optimization
Yes.
and performance because you can do occlusion portals
Mm-hmm.
and use that to help you get some extra performance out of it because it won't unocclude this stuff despite these being non-static objects until the
Mm-hmm.
portals open.
And I mean, if we want to get really fancy with optimization, you could even keep the collider disabled until the scene, like an asynchronous scene load has completed. Like the next room has loaded, now enable the collider for the door, and then the door trigger turns on. And if you're standing in it, then the door's automatically open. So it's like the room
If,
won't open until it's loaded.
yeah,
In
if
this
you want them.
case, it's cubes. So
Yeah,
not a big deal.
we're not pushing
Yeah.
anything. We could
Um,
probably run this on a toaster.
but yeah, so we
All
are
right.
at 1 o'clock.
Oh,
Um,
no.
already, which is uh, when our event's supposed to end. But in true fashion, just like yesterday, we're gonna go a little bit over. So I think now is a good time for any questions anyone has. Start typing them in the chat. Let us know. Um, I think the next room duplicating this stuff, showing the modularity of this is it's nice because now in this room, even if we duplicated, everything, the functionality, all that stuff, this room is now set up. So if there's a different method you wanted to open the door, you already have triggers and blocks and cubes available. So you could literally just set a base room, duplicate it a bunch of times, set up a dungeon layout, and then just change the methods with which the keys appear. And then you got yourself a video game. Which is pretty cool.
Yep. And yeah, just throw different mechanics in and good to go.
Yeah.
And you can even randomize those with spawners and things like that.
Yep. Spawners, timers,
Yeah, just throw different mechanics in.
counters.
Yeah. And you can even randomize those with spawners and things like that.
And then yeah, if we really get deep into it, you know, that's when you can start to make your custom functionality. And just like we talked about yesterday, if there was something specific that you wanted, you know, very, very specific to your game or your idea, really all you need to do to get it back into the activator system or, you know, quote unquote compatible with GroKit Core is just to simply have some public functions that you can call. It's not even a compatibility thing with GroKit Core. I shouldn't use that word. It's basically as long as you expose the things that you want, just like you would in base Unity as something that you could run through events, then it works with the system. So let's say you have all this set up and you have the entire dungeon set up, and then you think of some really interesting mechanic, you know, like some kind of grapple hook shot, something like that, that pulls items to you, and you might be able to construct those with components, but it'd just be easier to write like your own custom script, couple lines. You don't have to redo anything. You just write that script and then just call certain functions when you need to, like when the key gets to you, tell the grab object to grab it. And then that's already on an activator, that's already on a trigger. You know, all that stuff it's all routed, it's all set up, it's all good. So this isn't necessarily just we prototyped this, but now we'll go in and do it for real and code it and all. Like, no, like we could take this and just put unique visuals into it, a couple custom scripts if we need them, some scoreboard stuff, some count puzzles to, you know, wire up some of these mechanics, and this would be like good to go. So it's just like a little reminder that like GroKit Core is not like a prototype tool to be replaced. It's like a tool to start with prototyping, but then transition into actual implementation of routing and mechanics. That's why we harp on the activator stuff so much and always be routing, because again, this isn't something that you're just going to get rid of. Like, okay, it works, and now I'm done. I can build my level for real. This will stay through the entire like production pipeline. So, I mean, like as we've talked about, that's what GroKit is essentially, is all of this stuff wired very carefully and very meticulously by Cordelia and Chris to be a fully functioning, fully developed game.
Consider it kind of like your foundation to build on.
Yeah. In a similar way, you know, like that's kind of how I use Pro Builder. When I use Pro Builder, I don't like graybox the whole level and then start replacing it. I usually use Pro Builder for structural things so that they can stay the entire time. So using the world space materials and textures and stuff, it'd be like, okay, so these are my walls. They're just simple cubes. Pro Builder's perfect for that. I throw some textures on it, it's good to go. And then props and stuff, I just use like actual visual assets. So when I use Pro Builder, I'm never actually replacing it. But other people, you know, use Pro Builder in different ways, where they'll use it to graybox and then completely replace everything. And that's a distinction here. Is GroKit Core does not need to be replaced. In fact, I'll go so far as to say should not be replaced by anything else. Once you have it set up and built and routed, it's going to be your friend for the rest of the development. Okay. No questions. It's all good. Speaking of that, we are going into our office hours. I'm gonna load Discord up for today. So I will be hanging out in the office hours channel on the GroKit Core Hackathon section of our Discord. So if anyone has any questions or if anyone needs to chat about anything, I'll be hanging out in there for a little while. Yeah. Anything else spring to mind, Cordelia?
I think we're doing good. Hopefully, yeah, definitely reach out. I'll be on tomorrow for office hours as well. So if you have something you run into after, then definitely reach out.
Yeah. Even if you don't see us hanging out in like the literal voice chat where you can just pop in, still like message, you know, anytime. We'll we're always monitoring our Discord, so we will get the message and be able to respond or talk to the correct person that can respond, no problem. So yeah, there'll always be someone around for support, especially for the rest of this weekend, because it's a really good hackathon, but also just in general, anytime. So even after the hackathon, don't hesitate. Okay. Well then, with that, we will bid everybody goodbye. Thanks for tuning in. Um, thanks for following along with us, and uh, yeah, we'll see you in the Discord, I suppose. All right. Bye, everybody.